Donald Trump has officially chosen to torpedo the crucial partnership with our closest neighbor, and he's doing it with a shocking level of irresponsibility. Anyone who truly grasps the fragility of the global economy should be terrified by his actions. The former head of both the Bank of England and Bank of Canada, Mark Carney, has effectively called out Trump's aggressive tactics. He didn't respond with a public outcry, but with a sobering, fact-based assessment of reality that Trump simply cannot handle. But hear this. This is far more than a simple disagreement over commerce. This is the catastrophic collapse of the most reliable economic relationship on Earth. It's honestly unbelievable he voiced his intent so openly. Trump is treating Canada, yes, Canada, not as a trusted friend, but as a hostile entity that he feels must be brought into submission. Can you believe the sheer audacity? We are talking about a country that fights alongside us, builds essential infrastructure with us, and buys more of our products than China, Japan, and the United Kingdom combined. This entire situation is genuinely bewildering. This isn't just a squabble over dairy, wood, or metal fees. We are seeing the total disintegration of the North American Economic Partnership. And believe me, if this continues, the financial hardship facing American households will be worse than anything we've experienced in decades. Let's catch up on the details. On one side, you have Donald Trump, who is back in the White House for less than a year and is already hungry for conflict. Since returning to office again in January 2025, he's been desperate to prove that his America First philosophy can force absolutely anyone into submission. From the very beginning, he seemed convinced that Canada would simply acquiesce like a junior compliant partner. Whether it was his attacks on NATO, his removal from international agreements, or his disrespect toward G7 leaders, Trump really cemented his image as a leader who sees alliances not as mutual strengths, but as transactional protection schemes. But here is where his strategy hits a massive obstacle. He isn't confronting a typical career politician this time. He's up against Mark Carney, a man who knows the intricacies of the global financial system perhaps better than anyone alive. And this is where things get out of hand. We are now months deep into a fabricated emergency where the United States is threatening a 25% levy on Canadian goods. Vehicle assembly facilities in Michigan are stalled. Timber deliveries to construction companies in Arizona are being reduced. Tourist income in Florida from Canadian snowbirds is suddenly uncertain. This disaster is unfolding because the Trump administration is stuck over disagreements that, quite honestly, do not exist in reality. And who is getting absolutely crushed in the middle of this mess? You guessed it, the American consumer. Mark Carney is the figurehead of the globalist system that Trump despises. Yet here's the crucial difference. Carney has no interest in public drama. He has no interest in a social media spat. He demands stability. But Trump demands total surrender. And let's be brutally honest for a moment. We all understand that commerce agreements are intricate. We all know there are long-standing, legitimate complaints about dairy quotas or timber assistance programs that go back generations. But what we are witnessing now is not a negotiation. It is an extortion attempt. Now, back to the central issue. Disclosures from around late October 2025 demonstrated just how erratic Trump was getting behind closed doors. He called Carney's principled refusal to void existing agreements nasty and actually went so far as to claim that Canada was behaving like a threat to U.S. national security. Talk about inflammatory language. Essentially, Trump was labeling our closest friend a national security threat, the same category we reserve for North Korea and Iran, simply because they wouldn't cave to his exact demands on a commerce renegotiation that wasn't even scheduled. And this wasn't kept quiet. Trump made absolutely certain to air his complaints publicly, making it abundantly clear that he was furious over the lack of submission from Ottawa. He went on Truth Social, he went on cable news, and he criticized the Canadian leadership for taking advantage of the United States. This declaration sent shockwaves throughout the American business world because it raised serious concerns. If Donald Trump, the so-called tariff man, could turn against Canada, a nation whose economy is fundamentally linked with ours, what did that signal for every other ally fighting to hold its ground in the global market? This isn't an isolated incident. Donald Trump's loyalty truly only extends to himself. Whenever a person stops being helpful or does something he disagrees with, he is quick to discard them. This pattern has been observed repeatedly. Just recall how he abandoned Jeff Sessions immediately after Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. Sessions was the first senator to back Trump, a devoted supporter who gave him credibility when no one else would. But the minute Sessions upheld the law instead of Trump's personal wishes, he was minimized, shamed, and ultimately dismissed. Then there was William Barr. Barr went to extreme measures to defend Trump, misrepresenting the Mueller report and intervening in legal cases for Trump's allies. But Trump was displeased when Barr refused to confiscate voting machines or declare the 2020 election fraudulent. He immediately went from my attorney general to a Reno and a swamp creature. And let's not forget how he distanced himself from Mike Pence when Pence refused to violate the Constitution on January 6th. Pence served him faithfully for 4 years, standing by him through every scandal, every impeachment attempt, every transgression. But the second Pence chose the Constitution over Trump's ego, Trump unleashed a mob on him. Even Kevin McCarthy suffered a similar fate when he tried to balance the disorder of the House caucus with the practicalities of governing. McCarthy humiliated himself repeatedly to satisfy Trump, flying to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring after the insurrection. But it was never enough. When McCarthy needed to pass a budget to keep the government operating, Trump left him exposed. Now, it appears Canada is in the crosshairs. This behavior is becoming all too predictable. You can demonstrate total devotion and defend Trump every single day, but the instant you deviate from his path or cease to be useful, he'll cast you aside without any remorse. Trump doesn't want allies. He wants accomplices. And when a country like Canada refuses to be an accomplice to his economic delusions, they are instantly branded an enemy. So what exactly did Mark Carney do to provoke Donald Trump? Well, it essentially comes down to a refusal to follow Trump's rules. The confrontation occurred because Trump's inner circle demanded one-sided concessions on USMCA enforcement, essentially insisting on the right to reimpose levies whenever they desired, while the Canadians were focused on preserving the rules-based framework that businesses depend on. The ultimate breakdown happened simply because no one was willing to back down on the fundamental principle that a contract is a contract. As an economic leader and central banker, Carney chose a practical approach. He concentrated on the facts. He emphasized the integrated supply chains and absolutely refused to engage in the personal attacks. His method seemed to be exactly what was needed: calm, logical, grounded in evidence. Initially, Trump appeared accepting of this. He respects tough operators in business and the idea of high-stakes commerce. But as the commerce talks dragged into November, problems started to emerge. Vehicle component prices were soaring. Small companies in border states were panicking. And the financial market began to fluctuate because investors despise unpredictability. As the Canadians held their position, public opinion predictably began to shift its criticism toward the disarray coming from the White House. Surveys indicated that Americans were increasingly frustrated with the rising cost of goods and the pointless drama. This was the point where Trump started to feel the pressure. You see, Trump values his image as a master dealmaker, his stock market results, and overall his perception of strength. He desperately wants to avoid being blamed for a recession caused by his own completely unnecessary mistakes. That is certainly not the win he is looking for. And then Carney made a move that, in Trump's view, was a severe betrayal. Carney started actively seeking ways to diversify Canada's commerce, initiating discussions with other Pacific nations, and even hinting at a willingness to engage more closely with Europe. He believed he had to safeguard his country's economy from a volatile partner. But when Trump got wind of this, he completely lost control. In Trump's worldview, seeking diversity is nothing more than a sign of weakness and disloyalty. Looking for other partners, that is outright treason against America first. Any friend who dares to protect their own national interests instead of serving ours is immediately labeled a traitor. This left Carney and the Canadian leadership in an impossible position. On one hand, they absolutely need entry to the U.S. market to maintain their economy. The Canadian economy is heavily reliant on cross-border trade, and losing that access would be a disaster. The corporate sector in Toronto and Montreal would abandon the government immediately if the U.S. border closed. On the other hand, they must uphold their national independence. That means figuring out how to resist a bully, maintaining their respect, and ensuring they are not merely a subject state. The difficult part is that all of that requires some level of opposition against Trump, an action that infuriates the White House. So Canada is truly trapped. If they keep attempting to appease Trump, which means scrapping the USMCA and accepting shameful levies, that only makes the economic situation worse and paints their government as feeble. Or they can execute their actual duty as a sovereign nation, which means remaining resolute and seeking diversity, but that will certainly make Trump lash out at them with the full might of the U.S. government. It is a terrible predicament, and that is the kind of mess Trump manufactures for international leaders. He demands total devotion and expects them to sacrifice the well-being of their own people without question. But then he assigns blame when things go badly. He is not hesitant about sacrificing them whenever it serves his purpose. This whole scenario is causing significant strain within the American conservative movement, too. If Trump has turned against Canada and is willing to publicly undermine our most dependable trading partner, every other friend is left wondering if they are next. Those moderate Republicans who are trying to balance the needs of American business are now deeply worried about being the next ones to be abandoned. They understand that a commerce war with Canada is unwinnable and catastrophic for the U.S. economy. Meanwhile, the most extreme faction believes Canada isn't devoted enough and that they are too woke, using cultural complaints to justify financial destruction. Things became even more intense when Steve Schmidt, one of the most prominent former Republican strategists, broke his usual partisan silence. Schmidt had been advocating for a return to common sense and criticized Trump for his disgusting insults toward Canada. He called out the behavior for what it is: irresponsible, unethical, and foolish. When someone as deeply ingrained in the history of the Republican Party as Schmidt starts opposing you on a core topic like commerce and alliances, you know you are in serious trouble. Now, let's examine the legal reality, because this is not just about social media posts. The American importing community decided to pursue legal action on November 5, 2025. A group of business organizations filed a lawsuit in federal court asserting that Trump's utilization of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, to impose these levies was a significant legal overreach. They stressed that the authority to tax belongs to Congress, not the president. The Constitution is perfectly clear on this. Article 1, Section 8 grants Congress the authority to lay and collect duties. The legal procedure moved quite swiftly, and the Supreme Court acknowledged the urgency. After all, every day the levies continue means increased costs for American households. And let me tell you, the legal experts did not hold back in their analysis. It was a major setback for the administration's arguments. The broad agreement among constitutional scholars is that Trump's actions were constitutionally indefensible. That's legal phrasing for telling you that you have absolutely no solid foundation to stand on here. There is no legal validity to what you are doing. You are simply abusing your power. The Supreme Court justices, even the conservatives, appeared doubtful during oral arguments. Justice Gorsuch warned about a one-way ratchet of executive power. This is a monumental issue that does not usually happen when a president invokes national security. Legal experts are noting that we haven't seen a court challenge to executive tariff authority this substantial since the steel cases of the mid-20th century. A conservative legal voice who has been raising the alarm about Trump for years made a statement that truly deserves everyone's attention. He stated that if these levies are permitted to stand, we are effectively erasing the separation of powers and handing the president the power of a king over the economy. Just take a moment to consider that. We are talking about the fundamental structure of our government, and this is coming from a conservative voice who believes in originalism and the literal wording of the Constitution. Another expert, Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor who often defends strong executive power, noted that the use of emergency powers to resolve a commerce dispute is a bridge too far. When legal minds from both sides start using terms like abuse of discretion and ultra vires, that's the time to seriously pay attention. So, let's break down the potential impact of this confrontation, because it's not simply a gripping political story. It has serious implications for how our economy functions. First up is the immediate political consequence. Trump is already facing considerable criticism due to the rising cost of living, and his approval ratings are suffering in crucial swing states like Michigan and Wisconsin. Farmers and manufacturers are becoming uneasy about the approaching midterm election cycle, which is certainly increasing the pressure. They vividly recall the pain of the 2018 commerce wars, and they do not want a repeat. The latest dangerous development with Canada is that they are now threatening targeted retaliatory levies on goods from key Republican-held districts. And honestly, that is a bad look for him. Most people in America have a great deal of respect for Canada as a vital component of our system, even if they don't always consciously think about it. We cross the border for holidays, we share sports teams, we share a culture. The Democrats are absolutely planning to capitalize on this situation. They will argue that Trump believes he is above the economic laws of physics, does not genuinely value the well-being of American workers, and they will have the increasing costs at hardware stores and the grocery store to back up those claims. This will be Exhibit A in demonstrating that Trump is an agent of disorder. You can expect to see the Canada crisis appearing in opposition political ads, speeches, and public debates. Now let's address what this signifies for the global framework of commerce itself. Mark Carney has been relentlessly working to prevent the global trading system from fracturing into protectionist groups. He wants commerce to be seen as a source of reliability. But by taking this reckless action, Trump has charged right into a fight against the very concept of free commerce. Carney and his allies are now prepared to move forward without the United States, suggesting that the U.S. is no longer a trustworthy partner, which complicates things for America's status as the leader of the free world. Yet Carney likely felt he had no other option. If he had remained silent while the violation continued, Canada's reputation would suffer an even greater blow. This situation casts a massive spotlight on the fundamental principle at risk. At the core of the issue is whether the United States can simply abuse its authority whenever the president feels like it. If he is permitted to do that, it could completely redefine how the global economy works. The system was designed to have rules so that businesses could plan for the future. But Trump has always been uneasy with those restraints. He desires complete control over everything. If the violation is allowed, that is a significant endorsement of excessive executive power, and it creates a precedent for future leaders to misuse that power. So the ramifications of this case extend far beyond just the U.S. and Canada. It is about shaping the fundamental structure of the global economy for years to come. Each time Trump ignores standards, breaks laws, or attacks institutions like the USMCA, it weakens our democratic structures. It starts making behavior that used to be totally unacceptable feel normal. Consider this. If Trump can declare a national emergency to levy a tax on Canadian maple syrup, what will prevent the next leader from doing the same for political retaliation against a domestic industry? If he can simply misuse the IEPA whenever he desires, what will stop another leader from following that example? These actions don't just vanish when Trump leaves office. They become part of our new reality, and that is quite dangerous. Democracy depends on those norms and institutions. It relies on the assumption that those in power will follow the rules, even when it is slightly inconvenient. When those norms crumble, democracy itself begins to fail. Looking ahead to the 2026 midterms, it is evident that all of this will have significant effects. We are still a year away from those elections, but the narrative being established now is guaranteed to influence the results. If the story unfolding is one of Trump fighting every institution and failing while prices soar, that spells trouble for the Republican Party. Voters typically do not reward disorder and dysfunction. They desire reliability and capability. Right now, Trump is not offering either of those. So expect the opposition to vigorously promote a message focused on a return to normalcy after years of chaos under Trump. There are people who genuinely believe that if you vote for a check on his power, the economy will actually start functioning again. They are promising no more constant constitutional crises or disputes with our friendly neighbors, just good old-fashioned normal governance. That message might just resonate with a lot of voters, including some members of Trump's own party. So here's the bottom line. Donald Trump has pushed our closest ally to the breaking point, and for the first time, he is encountering a resistance he cannot simply bully his way through. This isn't just about trade imbalances. It's about whether we want to live in a world governed by the rule of law or the personal whims of one man. If the Supreme Court allows this to stand, then we are essentially saying the Constitution doesn't matter anymore when it concerns the president's economic power. That would signify we are entering a completely new era where the president is an economic dictator. It is about so much more than just timber costs. It is about whether we truly have a system that operates correctly or if we are just stuck with whoever can abuse power the most effectively. So keep your focus on this. Things are just getting started. The next few weeks will be critical as the legal challenges progress through the courts and the economic statistics are released. The consequences have never been more severe, the evidence never more compelling, and the final outcome never more uncertain.